On today's episode of the Human Equation podcast, I sit down with Dr. Luiz Franco of the National University of Mexico, a first-generation scientist and an incoming associate professor whose path in academia is defined by persistence, discipline, and conviction. We discuss his research contributions, his future works, how he approaches failure and uncertainty in the lab, and the future of science in the era of an increasingly era shaped by artificial intelligence. Towards the end, we discuss his advice for young scientists, specifically Mexican scientists, who are looking to pursue the journey in science. I'm honored to have him on, and I hope you all enjoy this discussion. So Dr. Franco, I wanted to start the conversation by asking you a little bit about your childhood. Did you always want to be a scientist? Like, were your parents scientists? How was that journey for you? Were you always the kid in the playground, trying to get the other kids to pay attention? And, did you always have that teacher knowledge desire within you? Talk a little bit about your childhood.
Well, actually, it was quite the opposite. No, growing up, I remember I was born in Mexicali, Baja California, and I went to a public elementary school there. Going to school, I guess, when I was a kid, the only thing in my mind was to wait for the break time and go play with my friends soccer or baseball. I used to play baseball at that time. So that was all that was in my mind, and I was a really bad student my first 2 years until my father saw my grades, and he was like, Luis, you should do a lot better. And he actually taught me math for that level, very basic math. And I started learning from him, who's a civil engineer, by the way. So he's has his way with numbers. He's very good at that. And from that moment, I remember I was 7 years old. Oh, because he told me you cannot go out after coming back from school. In the afternoons, I used to spend a lot of time with my friends, and he said you are not going to meet your friends in the afternoon until you do this extra homework I'm going to give you, and you have to do it right. And I was he was giving me very hard math problems, and I learned that way. And then I started becoming better. And then when I went back to classroom, I realized I was better than my peers. Yeah. And I think it was from that moment on that I started realizing, might be good at school. I was maybe 8 years old, but it didn't start that way. And this personality I had as a kid, caring more about other things than school, was always there. Even going to secondary school or high school, I was always more interested in sports than actually spending a lot of time reading books or learning more about science or even spending time in the lab. That was never a priority to me. That happened later. Might have been. So I went for university, I went to Tecnológico de Morelia, and then to Celaya, where I studied biochemical engineering. I remember it was about second year when I started learning from some of my professors that there was this research facility in Irapuato, where they do very good biotechnological research, and that was my first real interest in science. Right. And that's when I was maybe 20, 21 years old, when I started thinking, maybe this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. Right. And being a biochemical engineering training, I thought, biotechnology, using plants to maybe, modify them and produce medicine. That was the thing that was in my mind, which I don't know if it was a hot topic at the time. I'm talking about more than 20 years ago. I don't know when this started because I'm not an expert in the field. Yeah. But to me, it sounded like something very cool. It sounded like the future to me. So should I stop? Do you want to answer that question?
No. This is great. But so let me just I want to appreciate a little bit more of kind of what you just said.
So it sounds like you were really influenced by your father. He was a strong figure
In the early days.
in the early days, and I also didn't know that he was an engineer, and so it kind of makes sense how you sort of as a first step into the world of knowledge, right? You explored engineering. So those of you who don't know, Luis is an incredibly cerebral thinker, especially when it comes to like building things. When it comes to analyzing, and obviously, he spans a lot of different fields, right? Like neuroscience, engineering, data analysis, and it seems that you have a natural gift, and your dad sort of made sure that you realized or you put to use that gift. Let me ask you. Let's move slightly away from the childhood and talk a little bit about how you, as a person, developed a sense of identity as you moved into these different spaces, as you were exploring all of these different subjects and trying to find your way. What did you realize about people, and what did you realize about yourself that you discovered along that journey?
Seems a bit open question to answer. I guess.
I mean, one of the things that you discovered was that, hey, I can do this, right? You discover that.
Maybe the first when I actually decided to pursue a career in science was after I finished my bachelor, and I decided to go for a master's program, and this was in Mexico City, in a well-known research institute, Universidad. And at the time, I thought, the brightest young researcher go there, and it's not easy to get there. So I was like, maybe I should apply. Maybe I can get in. And I did. It was might have been the summer of 2008 when I applied and I got in, and it was great. I started realizing, maybe I can do this, because I also saw that first year in masters there, you have to take some classes with some of the professors, and I realized that I could do this, that it wasn't something that complicated for me. Before I got there, I was a little bit scared, like, I don't know if I have what it takes to do this. So maybe that was the first step into this mindset of, developing my own personality. I can do this. It's not that hard. And I know for everyone who's listening to this, if you think, this is something unachievable, that you have to have an exceptional talent to do it, it's not like that. Through my career, even after masters, when I went for a PhD in Belgium, and then I did a couple of postdocs here in the US, you of course you meet bright people like Emmanuel here interviewing me, but there are other people who might not have these exceptional skills, and they can still find a way in science and do decent work in science. So it's nothing to be scared of.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things so for those of you listening, right, Luis just was granted a professorship. I mean, a job, right, to become a professor, an assistant professor in his hometown in Mexico. And when he told me, I was incredibly happy, because having known Luis for a couple of years now, if anyone deserved it, it's definitely someone like him, where you can see, he's published in Science Advanced. He's done a lot of great work in retinocerebral cortex, and and to his point, right? Like, for anyone listening, Anything is possible in a sense, and I think Louis' story is an example of that. And to that point, Louis, I want to talk a little bit about the perception of Mexico as a country and the relationship of scientific innovation. Because oftentimes, you turn on the news, for example, in the US or around the world, and you hear an incomplete story about the Mexican identity or the Mexican ability. And there are a lot of people like yourselves around the world doing exceptional and great work. But oftentimes that gets overshadowed. Talk to me a little bit about why that is and how you think that narrative can change, not only with you, but also your colleagues that you will join at the university, and how to sort of retell the Mexican intellectual story. A lot of people don't know, for example, a lot of people of Latino or Spaniard or Mexican descent, I know they're separate, but people of that demographics that are not, white or Anglo-Saxon have contributed greatly to science. Ramon y Cajal is an example of that, right? The father of some would say the father of neuroscience. And so how do we dispel that myth that, for example, a particular class that isn't particularly represented in science as much is not capable or not at the frontier of innovation? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult question or a problem to solve. The perception, or at least in my experience, the perception I had from people in science, in academia, or related fields when I started my career abroad outside Mexico was like, this guy comes from a third world country, probably he doesn't know as much as we know, he's not that educated. But I changed their mind with my work. Once they saw the quality of, because I don't know if this is going to sound good, but experimentally, I developed very good skills. So I was able to do experiments with a high level of quality. And then after that, I was able to, interpret the results of my experiments also in a high level, right? So that changed the mind of many people who didn't know me. So it requires very hard work and dedication and endurance. And if you're Mexican out there and you plan to go abroad, and you will probably experience this for more than one person, but you can change their minds. So don't be discouraged by that. Now, as a how the world sees Mexico as a country, I mean, it's hard to change their minds because you see what's going on in Mexico. It's like there's a lot of violence and organized crime, and that's all the lay audience hear from Mexico. They don't hear about scientific innovation or scientific developments, which Mexico has had in the past. There have been some achievements and very good scientific achievements over the last decades. It's not in volume, it cannot compare to the United States, for instance. The United States is a huge country where science is heavily funded. It's not even like there are several orders of magnitude in difference in terms of funding. So you can't compete with the U.S. in those terms, but you can still do good work, and it will be ultimately up to you to put the effort, to put the hard work, and come up with something good out of your research.
So speaking about your research, Luis, what have you done in the past? A little bit, like, can you just give our audience? A lot of them are not, as brilliant as yourself. So try to give, just very digestible examples of it. And then as a follow-up on that, what are you most excited about as you start your lab in Mexico? Like how are you going to sort of help bring back that innovative perception of scientific innovation, as you embark on this new chapter of your academic journey?
All right. So when I started my master's, it was mostly in vitro physiology or electrophysiology.
And what is in vitro?
So before we go there, I think I haven't mentioned that my field is neuroscience, because I talked before about biotechnology and plants and that. So I started my career going for a master's program in neuroscience, and then as for my thesis, I did some electrophysiological recordings on brain slices, basically. And in vitro means that you take a piece of the brain, you put it in a chamber, you perfuse that piece of tissue or piece brain with saline, and then you can record electrical activity from neurons from that piece of brain.
Right.
This is like, I did this 15 years ago, around that, 16 years ago. This is considered, I guess, some technologies of the past. This is how probably neuroscience started many years ago. The field has moved to doing other things now involving using the whole animal, not just piece of brain. But this was very useful in the early days to learn more about connectivity and the biophysics of individual neurons. So that's how it started my career. Then what I wanted to do next is to record not from a single neuron, not from just a piece of brain, but more like the whole animal, and see how those neurons code information from the environment when the animal is alive and in a circuit, right? So for this reason, I moved to a laboratory in Belgium to study olfactory computations in Drosophila melanogaster.
Wow.
Right? So, but I was able to do, so the important thing for me here is that I was able to use an alive fly, which I will open a piece of the cuticle on top of the head, and I will have access to the a region of the brain called the antennal lobe that processes olfactory information.
Like smell.
Yeah, like smells. So, and I did patch gland recordings. I also did calcium imaging in these neurons, and I was able to learn more about how you can say entire neural circuit, but constrained to this antennal lobe, how this circuit processes sensory information, right? So that was my PhD, and I did some collaborations with other labs. One of them, we use an animal model for a disorder called Fragile X syndrome. So we have this Fragile X syndrome fly, or a model for that disease, and then we found some deficits in how neurons process information there. So the good thing about using Drosophila is it's a very genetically tractable model, and it's very easy to do experiments. You can do experiments really fast. So that was part of the reason why I was able to establish these collaborations and do a lot of work in a limited amount of time. We had this other fun collaboration with the yeast lab, which they developed yeast that didn't produce an ester. If I recall well, the name of the gene was ATF1, which they knocked out in this yeast. So this yeast wasn't able to make this smell that attracts flies.
Right.
And so this is very interesting, actually.
Right.
This paper, once we published it got out in the different news outlets,
Right.
and across Europe and some in the US.
Right.
So that the funny story here is that if this yeast doesn't produce that ester, flies won't like to go there. So I don't know if you have experience with this, but if you open a wine bottle and you leave it there, you will see after, like especially in the summer when there are a lot of flies, you will see that a lot of flies will go into the bottle The same with the beer. Actually, we're using yeast. This was a beer lab in Belgium. We're using yeast that are used to produce beer. I think so. Right. So there are these esters that are good smell for flies. That means food for them, and they will go there.
Right.
And that was the story. And I did some calcium imaging for them. I did some behavior for them.
And so so fast forward in that, like, what would you consider as one of your most seminal findings, like one of your best papers that was published in a high-ranking journal? Could you just give us a short summary on that? Like, what was your fast forwarding from all of that stuff in your PhD?
I overextended on the Drosophila story. Yeah. So, well, first let me say why I changed fields. So with the fly, I was able to do recordings in the brain in a live animal, but I wanted more. I wanted to study animal behavior and the neural basis of that animal behavior. That's why I moved to the mouse field. That's why I started a postdoc at the University of California, Santa Barbara, in which I was able to record neural activity from the rich pineal cortex, which is a big part of dorsal cortex in the mouse that is considered an association area, which means that it receives inputs from different regions of the brain.
Like smell, sound.
In this case, let's say that it receives considerable visual information from the visual cortex that is next to it, and it has connections with the hippocampus, for instance.
Where it records like place and memory.
Like place or head direction. And then it has also connections with more anterior regions that are involved in motor planning.
So we can say this is kind of a place that gets information from a lot of different places.
Yeah. So and what I found there, it was that there are neurons in rich pineal cortex that multiplex sensory visual information with the eventual decision.
What is multiplex?
Multiplex. Sorry. Yeah. So that means that it combines. There are neurons that combine this information, and then they can inform, or they might be a center for processing spatial decisions based on the visual sensory information.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, to me, one of the works I feel more proud of.
Right.
Then
and something you're among one of the first to sort of find that observation, right?
We were, I think, in rich pineal cortex. Yes, I think we were the first to publish this. Yeah.
And so talk to us about kind of what you're excited to study in your lab, and what you're excited about. And again, as Luis sort of talks about his journey and his story, I think you can hear quite clearly how he comfortably is able to sort of move from one field to another, one technique to another. And that's definitely something that when I interact with Luis on a day-to-day basis, I can see, right? Like, one day he's building a machine for a rig, the other day he's trying to set up like telescopes or whatever these scientists use for, measuring neurons, and incredibly technically brilliant person. And so, to that point, Luis, what question gets you excited right now? Something that kind of you want to tackle and solve. Like, what is that you're sort of exploring in your lab?
Yeah. So one of the things I haven't mentioned is that most of the work I did before coming to the University of Oregon wasn't head-restricted animals in the fly and also in the mouse. But as we all know, we are not head fixed. Like, we are not animals in which our heads are restricted all the time. We can consider ourselves freely moving, right? So now that I'm going to start my lab in 2017 and
2027.
Oh yeah, 2027. You should cut that.
No, that's cool. They're sympathetic.
Yeah. Okay, let me explain about this. So now I'm moving to study cortical computations in freely moving animals, freely moving mice, right? So the idea is that so we want to understand how the animal is able to process visual information actively as the mouse is sampling its environment, as it is moving through the environment, the way it actually happens in the real world. And while they're doing that, we are planning to record the activity of neurons in visual cortex and also in rich spinal cortex to learn more about both the sensory processing and the different features of this sensory processing, and also how different information is associated in rich spinal cortex and how spatial decisions are made in an actively moving mouse in environment, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and this is something that I get excited about because, what I sort of support these guys in doing is the mathematics and the physics that governs this. And, for those of you listening, right, I think when I look at the field of neuroscience, for example, right, it's roughly about close to 300 years, let's say, plus or minus. When you think about the field of physics, right, it's far much more a longer history than neuroscience. And so I see the things that Luiz and other people in the field are doing, where they are moving from an experimental setup where the animal that you're studying isn't head fixed and constrained to an environment, but now can freely move in an environment akin to how you and I move in an environment. I see this as a critical moment in the history of neuroscience, where you are going to start to get new types of results and new types of insights that we've never gotten about the brain and how things work. And so I would argue that people like Luiz as a name is going to be a future star in these fields because, it's the critical juncture, or is the critical moment where you'll start seeing new kinds of results. And so I'm super excited about this type of work. Let's go a little bit backwards, a little bit more to the more personal side. So Luiz, you have sacrificed a lot of your time doing science and, moving from one country to another, talk a little bit about, are you planning to have a family at some point? Talk about, do you have a partner? Like, or are you more like most of us scientists who are just kind of lonely and, live by ourselves and chasing this big glorious question? Like, talk a little bit about, your partner and the people that have supported you over the years, and whether or not, you're planning to have little mini Luizes. I'm setting him up so he can thank his wife, which I know she's listening.
Yeah. So I don't know. I want to have kids, of course. But it's also a question for my wife. We'll see. We'll see in the future. Now that we are moving to Querétaro for my new position as a faculty in the National University of Mexico, this would be a more stable job for me. So I don't have to apply for new jobs. I don't have to move to another city. So this would be a good time to start a family. But wife also has a say on this.
Right,
yeah.
And your mom,
You spoke about your dad, but did you know?
Oh yeah.
Is your like what has your mom, or how has she been an influence in your journey so far?
Yes. So I didn't mention this. So the biology influence and chemistry influence in my life doesn't come from my father. My mother is a chemist. She worked her entire career as a chemist in a hospital, like analyzing blood samples and that kind of stuff. So when I went for biochemical engineering, people were saying, "Oh, you went there because your father is an engineer and your mother is a chemist." So maybe she has had that influence in me. She always worked in a lab, doing different things than what I do. I'm more like you can say physiologist. He was more like on the biological chemical side. But I think more than that, my mother has been a very strong support for me. This journey wasn't easy. Especially after I left Mexico, when I faced struggles, not particularly related to science, but sometimes life is difficult, especially when you're alone in a different country.
Yeah.
So those phone calls with my mother over, my God, the last 10, 15 years, they have been very helpful for me. They have helped me a lot to stay focused on my career and to continue further no matter what. And she always said to me, there's going to be a reward. And I was like very skeptical. I don't think there's going to be a reward. I don't think I'm going to get it. Like I always I had this thought in my mind for so many years, like I don't think no one's going to offer me a job. This is too competitive. This is too tough. And my mother was always there. You should keep working. You should keep, stay there, and the reward will come at the end.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. Even I never knew that your mom was a chemist and your dad is an engineer. So I'm learning a lot about you, and it's quite fascinating that this is kind of what has evolved over the years. So my last question to you, what would you say to anyone listening? What would you like people to know about this journey, right? When I first was thinking about having you on the podcast, I thought about this, this quote was coming up in my mind, giving up is not an option, right? And I think that's what the title of this podcast is. What would you like people to know? And I'll share a little story with you all. So when Luis, was going through this process and got the job, I remember the first time I was at the airport, and he sent me his research statement, and I was like, hey, I read this, maybe, because we give each other advice on our work, and so this is my turn to sort of exchange and sort of give him some feedback. And I was looking at his work. I was like, no, man, you should be more confident and say that you did this. And he was like, I don't know, And eventually, he got this job, which I knew he was gonna get. And but one of the things that really moved me was when he got it. He said, he talked about this idea of all the suffering, and I kind of felt that because, as someone who is not of Anglo-Saxon descent, right? Like I can relate a lot to being in a foreign country, or being the only black physicist in the room, and the struggles that come with that. And so I really appreciate Luis's existence as a person, but also he's a testament to the power of perseverance and resilience, and also the pursuit of excellence and greatness, right? And so to close it out, Luis, like what do you want to tell to some kid in Guadalajara, or some kid in Nicaragua, or a kid anywhere in the world, or a prospective scientist listening, who may experience the same journey that you have experienced and I've experienced? Like what do you want to say to that?
I think first you need to know that the journey is not going to be easy. You need to know whether you are mentally strong enough to go through it, the process. This is if you want to become a scientist, if you want to have your own lab, this is going to be a very long journey. Like from your bachelor's, from the day you started your bachelor's. So for me, I started 2003. I got the job 2026.
Wow.
So that's a 23-year journey, right? Going through all these different stages, and it's becoming even more and more competitive. Like some people say, it is now standard to do 2 postdocs. So not only you have to do your bachelor's, your master's, your PhD, now it is expected from you to do 2 postdocs before you can actually be competitive enough to apply for a faculty job. But more generally, I would say, if you're passionate about something, go for it. Like if it doesn't feel like you're working, it feels like you're just having a hobby, right? I remember when I was able to set up an experiment and just do the experiment, it was a lot of fun for me. Like I had a lot of fun. I was enjoying. I remember why I started this. Maybe take a parenthesis here. Why I decided to go for electrophysiology or physiology as my main subfield within neuroscience, because you could do neuroscience also doing omics stuff or other techniques. It felt like a video game to me, seeing those traces on the screen, and I was like, can you get paid to do this? Like I couldn't even believe, like I was having fun doing this. So that's what I mean. If you're passionate about something, if you really like it, go for it. You will learn, because it's not going to feel like a struggle. It's going to feel like you are rewarding yourself by doing what you like, right? Just bear in mind, it's not easy, but you can do it, right? It's not, you don't require exceptional abilities to do it. Every normal person can do it. Just, set your mind to it and put the hard work, and you can do it.
Right.
Well, that concludes it for this episode of the podcast. I'd like to thank Dr. Franco for coming on once again. And, I'm going to include Dr. Franco's Google Scholar page and the university in Mexico where he's going to embark on this new journey, so that you all can learn more about the university and the great faculty members that he'll be joining, and the great work that's being done in Mexico outside of what you hear in the media, and also 1 or 2 of his publications highlighting his work in the retrospinal cortex. Thank you again for this for joining us, and until next time.